What's up, bristles? So it's been a long time. I've shot this intro I don't know how many times. I really should work from a script, but I fucking hate scripts. I tried it before and I hate doing what somebody else tells me to do, even if it's me telling future me what to do. But anyway, I've been trying to make this video for a while now. I was getting behind schedule. And what is that schedule, you might ask? Well, I had a deadline. I decided this year I would try a tournament for the first time. With that in mind, I had about 3 months to get an army ready. And as you know, nothing ever gets done on time. Point of it is, this video, I'm going to paint some skeletons. I'm going to show you how I paint my skeletons for my particular Vampire Counts army for the old world. I've already taken these skeletons off squares after the end times to use in Age of Sigmar and put them on circles, and then over the Christmas break I put them back on squares for this. This won't show the whole army. I will do a showcase of the list I took to the tournament at the end, and as I paint I will talk through obviously the painting progress and also my experience of army painting. I like sitting down and taking my time on a miniature to miniature basis. The most I've done is my Corn army, which you may have seen in previous videos, where I'd paint a unit at a time, which is fine. Even that becomes a slog at times, and near the end I can't wait to be done. So a 2,000 point army. Anyway, I digress. Let's paint some skeletons. Hopefully you enjoy the video and me rambling and you like the look of the skeletons, and maybe it gives you an idea. Disclaimer, I start off this video talking about how I'm going to use my airbrush to speed things up. This in fact was not the case, because once I'd finished airbrushing, I came to the final step where I was about to dry brush, and I used the wrong color, which set me back to a previous step. And this entire process could be done as quickly with just dry brushing the colors instead of airbrushing, and I recommend you dry brush if you can. I thought the airbrush would speed things up, but considering I had to go back and fix a lot, it ended up not saving me any time. So that's just a disclaimer. Don't be put off by the fact that I start this video with an airbrush, because every step that I do with the airbrush is easily done with dry brushing and it looks just the same. I wasted my time. So with that out of the way, hopefully it's useful. Okay. Oh, also apologies, the production quality of this intro, I don't even have lights on or anything, because I've redone this intro multiple times over the past 4 months because circumstances changed and the direction of the video and the army project as a whole changed, and I'm just a bit fed up and I want to get this out into the wild so it could be of use to people, and so I can move on to some more videos, because it's been too long and I really enjoy making videos. So okay, so here I have Ushabti Bone. Prior to this I have sprayed it all with Zandri dust from the Rattle can. As soon as that was dried, I gave it a good drenching in Agrax Earthshade. Now I'm going to take my airbrush, although as I mentioned in the intro and as you'll find out later on, this is easily done with a dry brush and the airbrush is unnecessary. So here we are with Ushabti Bone from above and just go through the entire unit. This is my first time using my new airbrush, my Infinity Kiev from Harder and Steenbeck. Probably wasted on me because I'm still a novice, but I just wanted an upgrade from my cheap ass one from eBay. I'm essentially treating this in the same way as you would a Zenithal, if you're familiar, which is spray from above the model, so the brightest areas are at the top, and we will hopefully leave the Zandri dust and the Agrax in the shadows. I decided I was just going to use this on the entire block and do them all in one go instead of holding it skeleton by skeleton, because that was a bit tedious. Next color we're going to work with is Screaming Skull. Going to do the exact same thing from above, but here's how I prepare my paints for the airbrush. I take some airbrush flow improver, put it in a cup, followed by some brand specific thinner. I'm using brand specific because that's what was recommended on the Harder and Steenbeck channel. I assume they know their shit. So a bit of that, those two, and then mix in the paint I'm using. It takes me a while to get it to the consistency that I'm happy with and that I think might go through the airbrush nicely. Of course, if you're dry brushing, this is not a concern. Apologies for the background sound. There's a lot of birds outside my window, and also it's the evening time. My children are home from school. The older one is playing online, so that entails gratuitous amounts of shouting, and the other one has their friends in, and that also entails a lot of shouting, but it is what it is. You can see here now I add a bit of flow improver into the reservoir before I pour my paint into the airbrush, and then give it a little spray on a spare piece of cardboard or MDF, whatever you have lying around, just to check the airflow and to make sure it's spraying nicely before I point it at my miniatures. You'll also notice a quite sizable unit filler in there, a massive tree full of skeletons and dead bits. One of my favorite aspects about the modeling side of the old world is unit fillers. I just think they're neat. I think they're great. I love them, and I'm gonna make one for every unit. At this point, while using the airbrush, I take some Agrax Earthshade and some paper towel, because I feel like I've oversprayed on some areas and lost some of that shadow that I wanted. So I'm gonna kind of treat this like you might an oil wash, where I'm going to flood the model, and then I'm going to take some kitchen roll paper towel and wipe it off all the raised areas, and then if it's pooled too much on the inside, as you can see there in where the skeleton's tummy hole is, I went a bit too heavy. I'm going to just use some capillary action and dab the tissue in there to take some of the excess out. I realise it might be a waste of time leaving all this footage and waffling with the airbrush. Well, not waffling, it's an explanation, but I realize it could be a bit of a waste of time considering I end up redoing it all with a brush anyway. However, I thought it might be good to show, you know, this wasn't a straightforward linear process. It's very easy to be, or to feel, slightly misled when you see other people blasting out an army in record time, but for most of us that's not the case. We make mistakes all the time, and it takes a long time to paint armies. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're seeing people online and they're blasting out armies or even miniatures in what seems like no time at all, don't feel too bad about being behind and not being so quick, because you're seeing a small selection of people, and I think for most people that's not how it works, hence why there's a lot of games played with semi-painted or unpainted armies. And here's where things go tits up in terms of the painting process. It goes a bit pear-shaped in it. So here we go. If you're paying attention there, you'll notice I just took out Ushabti Bone to start dry brushing, which is 2 shades darker, 2 steps behind where I'm supposed to be at. So I done goofed that last shot. I used the wrong colour. I was supposed to use Screaming Skull, but I used Ushabti Bone. And the funny thing is, I didn't realise until the morning after, when I had spent the entire evening before that dry brushing Ushabti Bone onto 90 skeleton warriors and 30 graveguard and 10 black knights. So I'm a silly sausage, and I'm going to have to go over all that again with, well, it's not bad. It just means, like, you know, when I said at the start that I was going to save time using the airbrush for building up the layers, that was a lie. So I'm probably going to have to edit something at the start of the video. Hold on. While the airbrushing did get the paint on quick and in a nice layer, I don't think it saved me any time, because I ended up having to do the colours that I did through the airbrush again anyway. So in hindsight, once you spray your skeletons with Xandri dust, wash with Agrax Earthshade, then just dry brush with Ushabti Bone, and then Screaming Skull, which is the point I'm at now after having realised I made the mistake. Painting is not a linear process, especially not for me. I don't usually do army painting, and it doesn't matter how good you might be or where your skill level might be as like a display painter. Army painting is a very different beast and it's another skill to learn, and it's very different from display painting. And just because it's quick and might not use as technical methods or techniques, does not mean it's easy. So the point is, spray with Sandry Dust, wash with Agrax Earthshade, heavy dry brush with Shabbity Bone, light dry brush with Screaming Skull, then a white, and we'll go from there. This is going to be very awkward to edit. I'm a fool. And there we are, Screaming Skull, where we should be. So just get that onto the raised areas, very small dry brush, followed up by some white. I'm using Skull White from the Nostalgia series of Watercolor. By the way, don't sleep on Watercolor. And now I want my skeletons to look like they've just recently come out of the mud, so I wanted to make the bone a little bit dirty. So here I have some Seraphim Sepia. Unfortunately, halfway through I knocked over my pot of Seraphim Sepia and spilled the majority of it, and I bought some more at the local hobby shop, and lo and behold, they have changed their recipe for the Seraphim Sepia wash and it did not look the same. I was not happy. So luckily I found a nearly empty one in the back of my spare paint press, and it got the job done anyway. So there I just used contrast paint Black Templar to put a base down for anything that wasn't bone, so blacks, metallics and some browns. Next up is Rhinox Hide, and I'm going to paint all the leather straps. And then here is where I got annoyed. Lead Belcher would have been my go-to a few years ago, but I tried it for this, and I don't know if it was this particular paint pot or what, but I got pissed off because it just kept separating and would not cover. So I threw that away and I used Thrash Metal by Scale 75. I actually just realized I forgot to film the next step, but that was just to paint the cloth areas with Incubi Darkness, and then I highlight that with Sotek Green. I use a hard highlight on the edges, but then for the actual open areas closer to the edges of the cloth, I feather it out by diluting it down heavily. So that's just Sotek Green and a lot of water. By feathering I mean it's almost like you create a surface of moisture on the cloth and you pull the pigment through that surface of moisture, and you pull the pigment towards where you want the color to be the strongest. So I'm pulling it from the darker areas towards where my highlights are. So even on these projects where I'm trying to get a large number of miniatures done in a quicker time frame, I often like to pick at least one detail where I am going to put a little bit more effort in. To be honest, there's not a lot of cloth on these skeletons. Some of them don't even have any cloth on. Not a stitch of clothing on them. So as someone who likes to put a bit more effort in, this is like my fix, my treat to myself, to have something small to put a bit more effort into on quick projects. Like with my corn guys, the armor is just plain black with the trim being done rather quickly with dry brushing and washes. But the helmets, I spent a little extra time painting them so that they stand out a bit more. I usually pick something that's going to be a focal point or an important part. Moving on to the next highlight, it's going to be Sybarite Green. Just going to highlight the cloth again. There's not really much to elaborate on this part in terms of painting. I think I switched to a smaller brush. It was around this time in the progress that I decided I wasn't actually going to bring so many skeletons in my list. The way things were going, my zombie dragon, which I really wanted to take, it was going to take up a lot of real estate in my carry case, so I wanted to minimize the size of the rest of the army that I had to bring with me, and that meant cutting out a lot of skeletons and focusing on some smaller units. So I decided I really wanted to use my Vargeists because I've always loved Vargeist. So unit of 3 of those. I did also really want to have a cavalry unit because I'm not long after rewatching The Lord of the Rings. There's some really nice cavalry charges in that, and I wanted some of that in my army. So block of Black Knights led by a White King. Oh, I also wanted a Terrorgeist because it's just another model that I really love and wanted to use. Even though it's large, it shares the space with the zombie dragon, so that's not an issue. I also had 2 units of 5 direwolves because I had fun painting them and I was really happy with how they turned out, and they're also pretty good unit. And I had a level 4 necromancer, because apparently you need a level 4 wizard. The Black Knights actually counted towards my core because I was taking a White King as one of my leader choices. So that was nice. 10 Black Knights in my core, which meant spending less points on my skeletons. In the end, I took a unit of 25. And now for a highlight of Celestra Grey on the cloth. Spending an awful long time on the cloth. I did say that I would indulge myself a little bit here, but this is just an edge highlight. Nothing fancy. And it's also one of the last steps on the cloth. And here is how he looks with his cloth fully highlighted. But that's not the final step. So it's looking good, but I'm going to take some Athonian camo shade, because I think it'll be rare to find a video where I don't use it, and I just slap that all over the cloth. I actually could have held off on doing this for a while, because I end up going over the leather straps and all the metals with this too. Anything that isn't bone gets a nice coat of Athonian camo shade. The bone or the black on some of the shields, it goes black. It gets a coat of Athonian camo shade. Speaking of the shield, I'm just going to paint that black with some Chaos Black. I'm using the Nostalgia one because I really like it. And now Rhinox Hide, what am I doing with this? Going to paint the leather straps, any belts or straps on shields. While I have it out, I also covered the base with that too. And now I've got my thrash metal, and I'm going to highlight the metal that I have previously washed with the Athonian camo shade. Just some edge highlights here, nothing crazy, just to pick out around some of those divots as well on the sword, the shield, and the odd bit of armor, shin guards and fan braces and whatnot you might find lying around the place. I wasn't quite sure how best to utilize the skeletons in my games. I had a few lucky instances where I did something with them that actually ended up paying off for me in the end. Other times they didn't do a whole lot for the whole game because I kept them too far back and I was playing a bit too cagey and too cautious. I'd love to elaborate right now, but I have to speak on the next paint I'm about to use. For the next step, I'm going to take Rhinox Hide and Rakarth Flesh. I'm just going to make a 50-50 mix of them and highlight the leather with that, and then once that's dry I just do a straight up highlight of Rakarth Flesh. And now I think I have time for a little bit of a story. In my first game against a lovely chap named Nick Doran, my Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon was locked in combat with a Stonehorn. They were kind of doing equal damage to each other, but I didn't want my Vampire Lord to be in a drawn out combat because if he died my army would crumble. So I wondered if maybe I added my skeletons to the combat, would they do any damage? My opponent informed me that the skeletons would not in fact be able to harm the Stonehorn, however they would add to combat resolution. In the end they did in fact help me win the combat. His Stonehorn ran away, my Zombie Dragon failed to give chase, however the skeletons succeeded and ran the Stonehorn down. And now back to painting. Athonian camo shade returns, which I should have just, again, as I say, waited till I was done and slapped it everywhere that I wanted it, because I don't even think this is the last time I use it, but we'll see. My memory will be refreshed. As I said, I gave the base a few coats of Rhinox Hide, and now I'm going to dry brush it with Mornfang Brown. I'm not too precious with this step though. I don't mind it getting on the lower bits of the skeleton around the feet, because to show that he's getting dirty from it. And now a dry brush of Steel Legion Drab, and now another dry brush of Carrick Stone. And that's the dirt section of the base. I tidy up the rim when I'm done. I know I made a mess there. I pick out the stones with Celestra Grey, any rocks and stones. Which I then shade with Athonian camo shade naturally. Once that's dry, I'm going to come back with the Celestra Grey and just highlight that. Some stones, depending on what the stone is made of, some of them I sculpted because it's what I had, and some of it is actual stone for bigger things like pieces of slate on bases for the bigger ones, and more natural stones I dry brushed. For these ones that I may have hand sculpted or are sculpted detail from the model, I highlight, edge highlight, and in some cases feather. But once that's done, I use some skull white to highlight the stone, and that's the stone done. And now I'm going to thin down this Mornfang brown really heavily, lots of water, and I glaze it on to the shield and the weapons as a little bit of rust. I also put some around the rocks and skulls on bases to show them getting dirty over time from the soil. The reason I'm putting it on the armor and skeleton and weapons of the skeleton, and on some parts of the skeletons in fact, is to show some rust and also wear and tear from being buried in the dirt. This particular skeleton is from the Sepulchral Guard set for Warhammer Underworlds for the first season. It's a long time since I played Warhammer Underworlds. I got a bit pissed off with the seasonal nature of the game because I don't like when rules are invalidated or changed too regularly. I really don't like it. But I really like these models, so I want to use them. So himself and some of his buddies have been added to one unit of skeletons to just bulk up the numbers a little bit, and the rest will be added to suitable units in the future. For the bases, I've got a selection of things here. I got some static grass. I believe that's from Geek Gaming Scenics. I also have some clump foliage, grass, tufts from the Army Painter, and these flowers, I can't remember. They could be Army Painter. I can't remember where they're from. They're not as purple as I wanted, but I make do with what I have. But some of these flower tufts are a little too big, and I want to get as much mileage as I can from these because I have a lot of bases to cover. So I cut them with my scalpel, add some PVA glue there. That's Elmer's glue, which apparently is a popular brand in America and is now readily available in Ireland because it's used by slime YouTube channels to make slime, and kids love slime, so it's everywhere now. Anyway, stick some of them flowers on. Then with the tweezers, I put the grass, with the tweezers I put some static grass on, and in some cases some tufts. If I'm putting tufts on, I like to do it before the static grass because it's just easier. Give the base a little flick over the tub there so any excess falls off. I tried this out on this one miniature, but I completely forget to do it over the rest of the army, where on top of the static grass, to add some height, I put a dab of PVA glue and more static grass on top of that. I'll actually have to go back and check if it makes much of a difference, because I don't think it does, to be honest. It's looking lovely now, but I want to make some use of that clump foliage to add little shrubs or moss growing on the forest floor. So just break bits off and stick them in place with the tweezers. To be honest, with the clump foliage, a dab of super glue kind of helps, as opposed to the PVA. It just sticks better and is less likely to fall off while drying. And for this guy, I was testing out if I wanted to push the highlights a bit further on the bone. I took some skull white. I don't think I did this with the rest of the unit. I did do a unit which is highlighted with the white, but for the unit that I took, I did not. But I didn't change it. I might add the highlights in the future. We'll see. I can always come back to it. But this guy's in particular has his skull smashed open, so I put a dab of PVA glue in there and trim down a grass tuft and stick that in, because I like the idea of the skeletons themselves being kind of overgrown because they've become part of the land they've been risen from, because they're there so long. And sure, here's the wee man himself. Isn't he looking grand in his furs and all, furs and leathers? I'm really happy with how he turned out. I would not do the white on the rest of the unit. Actually, I did do the white on the rest of the unit, but I quickly changed my mind. I went over it with Seraphim Sepia to get rid of the colour. Although that was with the newer pot of Seraphim Sepia, which was super glossy, which I didn't like. But anyway. And this individual counts as one skeleton, obviously, because he takes up the space of one skeleton. Added some moss onto this fella to imply that he's been hanging about for a while, and I'd like to add this moss to my next unit filler that you're going to see in a second. If you'd like to see a video of that, let me know in the comments. As you may well know, all roads lead to Nagash, and Nagash is indeed death itself, hence the sign. And here it is, my other unit filler. This counts as 4 skeletons. I love this, had a lot of fun with it. I'm a little bothered by the glossiness of the final wash that I did on the bone there. You can see it on some parts, but I might go over it with some matte varnish. And here it is in the unit. I painted up the banner the night before the tournament because I wanted the screaming banner. It was supposed to be a banshee, but I was really struggling with it, and the vampire face was just easier, so I went with it. The inspiration visually for the unit is an older piece of artwork which you probably may recognize or be familiar with a gnarled tree and a horde of skeletons before it. I really like that artwork. And here's another unit, and the banner is not painted. Maybe I'll do a video on that. If you'd like me to do a video on painting banners, I'm not the best, I'm pretty new to it, but just drop a comment down below and I will get onto that. We can learn together. Yeah, we'll have fun with it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know I said I'd speak through my list at the end of the video, but I'm gonna do that in a separate, I think, so I can give it the time it needs. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and be good to each other. Peace!